Hey everyone, I'm David Lipton, trainer, speaker, coach, and founder of Applied Resources and Knowledge. You know, we all go through moments and seasons of our lives where we look back at a set of circumstances and life events and we wonder, why in the world did that ever happen? Why did we go through that? Why did things go the way they did? But would you agree with me that in those circumstances that God is in control and He's in charge? And that ultimately those circumstances and life events actually bring Him glory. And if you and I pay attention enough and we apply ourselves and we apply what we're learning from those circumstances, we can actually grow. There are several passages in Scripture that indicate that. Let's take a look at some of those together. 1 Corinthians chapter 10:11 says, "These things happened to make them an example for others. These things were written down as a warning for us who are living in the closing days of history." James chapter 1:17 says, "Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows." John chapter 9 verse 3 says, "Jesus answered, neither this man nor his parents sinned. Instead, he was born blind so that God could show what He can do for him." Galatians chapter 3 verse 4 reads like this, "Have you experienced so much for nothing? Surely it was not in vain, was it?" Austrian psychiatrist Viktor Frankl is known for his work, Man's Search for Meaning. And he was held captive in a Nazi concentration camp. And throughout that horrific set of circumstances and ordeal, he found that only 1 in 25 of his fellow Jews were going to survive this. So the question is, what was it that separated those from who survived as opposed to those who lost their lives? Those that lost their lives had basically come to a place where they said, you know what, this is my life's lot. There's no escaping this. I'm not going to live through this. And certainly that's why they lost their lives. They perished. And those that survived this came to a place in their lives throughout this ordeal and they said, you know, there is a purpose in this. Somehow God has a reason for all this suffering. And they lived to tell their stories, and they became part of a movement where this would never again happen to the Jewish people. I'm also reminded of an account where 3 schoolgirls were kidnapped by, of all people, their bus driver. And this bus driver basically imprisons these 3 young girls in his house. And for 10 years, these girls face torment and torture and negligence. In fact, one of them becomes pregnant as a result of their captor. Roll the clock forward 10 years later, and somehow the girls have had enough. They had enough of the suffering, and despite the threatenings that this captor of theirs breathed on them, and he threatened to kill their families and everyone they cared for and loved deeply, and they had had enough and they escape. They managed their escape, they are rescued, and eventually they're interviewed at a court hearing. And there in front of their captor, one of the girls, now a young lady, reads a statement that kind of goes like this: "I will not allow you or these set of circumstances to define who I am." What a powerful statement. Pastor and author Rick Warren talks about how some of our suffering that you and I go through, some of the unfortunate circumstances or when things go wrong, as we live through those, our words and even our lives can serve as an encouragement to others. In fact, out of the greatest pain, there's opportunity for the greatest ministry. Johnny Erickson Tada was a very promising athlete. She was a swimmer, and in an unfortunate diving accident, she ends up being a quadriplegic. And through this process, she wonders, why, God? Why did this happen? And of course, she goes through some emotional and psychological healing, but she never recovers out of her accident. And she decides that, you know what? In this, somehow, God is using this to glorify Him. And as it turns out, she takes up drawing and painting, and she's doing this with her mouth. Amazing. And years later, it turns out that she develops a ministry where she advocates for people with disabilities, and obviously for those that take care of those with disabilities. It becomes an international ministry where it encourages thousands and hundreds and thousands of people around the world. These people's lives serve as an example that you and I have the God-given ability to give life circumstances and events their meaning. I love this story, It's a Wonderful Life, with Jimmy Stewart and Donna Reed. And in case you haven't seen the movie, I'm not going to spoil it for you, but he finds himself in a situation where he has this need, this huge financial need. And here's this unassuming soul. He's just living his life. He's trying to do the best he can. And then all of a sudden, there's this huge need. Well, he thinks about ending his life because of his set of circumstances, and somehow God intervenes and he sends this angel down to just kind of point out to him that had he not been born, he wouldn't have impacted all these people's lives. And what life would have been like for these people had he not somehow touched them and influenced them. Again, he's this unassuming soul. He's just kind of living his life. He's kind of like the average guy, but he obviously had some unfulfilled dreams, and basically he's kind of held up in this town that he grew up in. Well, in the same way, you and I, even though we don't know it, we don't realize the impact of our lives, and even that might even mean some of the suffering that we go through. And that somehow God shows up in those circumstances and uses our lives to encourage other people and ultimately to bring Him glory. There's a song inside of you. There's a song inside of me, a message that only you and I can sing, that only you and I can live out. How about you? Take a few moments right now. Take about 5 minutes to look back at some life events and set of circumstances and ask yourself, what are some of the lessons that you've learned? How have you changed? What direction does your life seem to be taking? Take about 5 minutes, hit the pause button on this video session, and think back on those things. As a child of God, you and I have come to understand that all things work together for the good to those who love God and have been called according to His purpose. Feel free to like and share this video with someone that you care about deeply. I'd love to hear from you. Leave me a comment. And above all else, apply knowledge to move your needle of progress towards realizing more of your potential. Talk to you soon.